Hi, this is Traci Fenton, founder of WorldBlu, and today we're going to talk about why freedom at work matters to freedom in the world. So, can freedom at work, the method we teach here at WorldBlu, help advance freedom in the world? Well, first, let's take a look at the glaring problem that's going on in our world right now. According to the nonpartisan group Freedom House, we are seeing a 14-year global decline in the level of freedom and democracy worldwide, including in the United States. And this is a chart from one of their recent reports. And what they've even said is that this past year has brought further, faster erosion of America's own democratic standards, damaging its credibility as a champion of good governance and human rights. So we do have a big problem in the world right now with the level of democracy, not just in the United States, but globally in a 14-year decline. So if you think I'm sounding political or just talking about politics right now, what I want to talk about in this presentation is so much bigger than politics. Because the way this plays out isn't just the decline of political democracy, it's the decline of freedom that's happening worldwide in the form of so many different ways. It's taking the form of technological slavery, medical fascism, increased dependence on the government rather than self-government, surveillance, technology, mental manipulation, labels, and so much more is all stealing our deep sense of freedom. We live in a very interesting time. And according to author George Friedman, who's a master geopolitical forecaster and the author of the recent book, The Storm Before the Calm, America's Discord, the Coming Crisis of the 2020s, and the Triumph Beyond. He says in his book that there are two cycles converging for the first time ever in the 2020s in the United States. Okay, the first cycle he calls the institutional cycle, and it relates to deep structural changes. This cycle happens every 80 years. The first one began with the Revolutionary War and the drafting of the US Constitution in the mid-1780s, and ended in 1865 with the Civil War. The second institutional cycle he talks about completed with the end of World War II in 1945. And the third one is set to end around 2025. So we are just ending that cycle, and we're about to begin a new institutional cycle around 2025. The second cycle he calls the socioeconomic cycle, and it relates to economic and social dysfunction going on in the world right now. So this cycle happens every 50 years. The first one began in the 1880s after the Civil War. The second cycle was in the early 1930s after the Great Depression, and the last one occurred around 1980. So the next socioeconomic cycle is set to conclude in the late 2020s. So this will likely be a time of significant upheaval and change because for the first time in human history, these two cycles are converging in the United States at basically the same time. But as researcher George Friedman puts it, each of these American socioeconomic cycles ended in a period of confidence and prosperity. So we don't need to be afraid, but we do need to understand, as I know many of us are feeling, what's happening, that there is a lot of upheaval going on. And George Friedman is not the only author to talk about these ideas. Many other authors are as well. So there is a lot of upheaval. There's a lot of change going on. We need to understand what's happening, and we need to have a strategy. We need to be contributors during this time. So what's the optimal strategy to help us adapt and adjust to this new world that's going to be unfolding this decade? Well, we believe the optimal strategy is freedom at work. It's having the right mindset, the right leadership skills, and the right organizational design method to design this new world of institutional and socioeconomic changes that we need. So, how does freedom at work help advance freedom in the world? Well, it does so by helping to advance peace, helping to advance civic engagement, and helping to advance economic prosperity. So the Freedom at Work model does this. It helps advance peace, civic engagement, and economic prosperity. So how do we know this? Well, in her recent study of nearly 80 nations, Gretchen Spreitzer, a University of Michigan professor of management and organizations, found that there was significantly less corruption or unrest and more peace in nations where employees have the freedom to make decisions at work and where organizations are managed using a democratic leadership style like what we teach here at WorldBlu. Conversely, in countries where employees have to be more compliant in following a manager's decision, there is actually more unrest. So the way the workplace runs has a direct correlation to what goes on in our communities. Ms. Spreitzer also found that democratically run workplaces not only benefit from democratic management practices, but also enhance peace in their community by reducing the feelings of powerlessness at work. Democratic workplaces also create more democratic citizens. Let's take a very inspiring example. In Botswana, a nation working hard to build and sustain its political democracy, organizations are expected and encouraged to operate democratically. They see that connection between how an organization operates and actually advancing the level of political democracy in the country. So in 1993, Botswana's Ministry of Education decided to transition all their secondary schools from authoritarian to a democratic management structure. It's incredible. The result, according to the International Education Journal, students, administrators, and the country as a whole are benefiting from a more democratic citizenry. So again, by running their schools democratically and having that participation, having the experience of democracy, that has rippled out to help make Botswana a more democratic nation. I actually wrote an op-ed about this years ago, back in 2007, published in the Christian Science Monitor. The op-ed was called "A Better World, One Office at a Time." You can look it up and read the article if you'd like. Because let's remember this key point. 75% of your organization's culture is determined by the design of your systems and processes. So if you have an undemocratic culture in your workplace, that's because of your systems and processes not being democratic. So when you design democratic systems and processes in your workplace, you as a leader are directly able to contribute more democracy to our world. Now, again, what are those principles of democratic design? I've talked about it in my other presentations. These are the 10 principles you have to have in order to have democracy. And this was based on over a decade of research. You have to have these 10 principles. They're not just, nice ideas. These are the actual principles of organizational democracy. So purpose and vision, transparency, dialogue and listening, accountability, choice, individual and collective, that balance, fairness and dignity, integrity, decentralization, and reflection and evaluation. Many top companies that operate democratically in nations that might not yet be democratic help advance democracy and peace in the world. And here's an example of some of the WorldBlu certified freedom-centered companies we've actually certified as working democratically that are helping to advance democracy and peace in the world just by the way that they operate each day. Now at WorldBlu, we've been in business since 1997, and since 2007, we have been measuring the level of democracy in any organization that would like to have that measured. And as a result, we've been able to operate in over 80 countries now, in which we've trained leaders and organizations in the principles of organizational democracy. We've certified over 200 companies as top WorldBlu certified freedom center cultures, freedom center organizations worldwide. And those 200 companies have over 1 million employees working in certified democratic workplaces. So step by step, but this makes a difference, and it ripples out to impact our communities because of the way these companies operate. Now, our vision at WorldBlu is to see 1 billion people living, leading, and working in freedom worldwide. And we invite you to help us achieve this goal, because the bottom line is freedom at work does help advance freedom in the world. And boy, is it needed right now, my friends. So join us, help us reach this goal of 1 billion people living, leading, and working in freedom, so that we can have a more freedom-centered and democratic world that works for everyone.